This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace empowers people with creative ideas to succeed. Use the offer code Films&Stuff to get 10% off your first purchase. If I had to single out the two most compelling franchise blockbusters of the last few years, the films I'd pick are Black Panther and The Last Jedi. Now, I know both films have their detractors. They're not perfect, and I never argue as such. However, both should be commended for their challenging and unorthodox themes, how they both strive to reinvent their well-established franchises. I couldn't believe that Disney released these films within 2 months of each other. They didn't hold back, they weren't afraid to rustle feathers, they were aimed at your core. The strongest element in both films, the part that brings their radical new ideas to life, are their conflicted three-dimensional villains. Ben Solo and Erik Killmonger are the epitome of the idea that the best villains think they're the heroes. The morality behind their actions aren't inherently corrupted. It's only the extent of their actions and their inability to confront their own pain that leads them to becoming monsters. Often in blockbusters, especially Marvel ones, the antagonist is merely a foil for the protagonist to bounce off of, getting reduced screen time to make way for what really matters in these storylines. Killmonger and Kylo Ren, however, are far more than foils. They're not the characters who provide conflict, but the products of the series' overarching conflict. They exist because their worlds weren't saved. These two characters display such specific similarities that there's ground here to define a new villain archetype, what I hope to see more of in these branching cinematic universes, and for now, we're gonna call them the New Order villain. So, what is a New Order villain? Well, both of these characters start out as princes. They are the genetic relatives to the protagonists and mentor figures of their stories. Both in their youth were in prime position to be a part of the next wave of heroes. The stories that we, the audience, are familiar with are the expectations that define their childhood. That is until tragedy strikes as a key mentor figure unleashes an act of violence that traumatizes all parties. There is no understanding or forgiveness, only the temptation to forget it all and leave everything behind. Both kids are left with nothing, living in a world they don't understand. Their broken promises of greatness only fuel their journey towards evil. Their mission statement then becomes to destroy the power systems that created them, in this case being the Jedi and Wakanda. Everything that stands to protect and preserve the Old Guard is the enemy, and needs to be destroyed.
Let the past die.
Yeah, go ahead and burn all that.
Kill it, if you have to.
Burn it all!
That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
These characters come to the conclusion that the only way to destroy these power systems is by eroding them from the inside, and so both characters take command of these systems by betraying the archetypal villain played by Andy Serkis. Okay, that is way too specific of a coincidence. Now, both characters are, to a lesser extent, right. They've successfully identified the problematic elements of the flawed systems that created them, and have effectively exploited these systems to their benefit. However, what dooms their fate is that their lust for vengeance has destroyed any sense of peace or preservation. They have seized these systems for one purpose only, to burn it all. Now, I'd love to dive deeper into The Last Jedi and its villain Ben Solo, but that's a long video for another time. So for the remainder of this video, we are going to be purely focused on Erik Killmonger, and how he becomes Black Panther,
Just so I could kill you.
Quick question. Who is the protagonist of Black Panther? Well, the obvious answer would be T'Challa. We start the film in his point of view, and follow him as he earns his place as king and attempts to rule Wakanda. It's through him that we discover the pressures of protecting Wakanda, and how these pressures created his arch-nemesis, Erik Killmonger. This seems like a pretty cut-and-dried take, but to come to this conclusion would be intentionally neglecting Killmonger's role in the story. In fact, the argument could be made that T'Challa and Erik are dual protagonists, telling two origin stories of equal weight. This is also a part of the New Order villain archetype, with the antagonist being a mirror of sorts to the protagonist. This is one of the few times where Marvel has earned the villain having a similar look and power set to the hero outside of plot reasons. However, I still don't think that the dual protagonist criteria applies based on the film's progression. See, a film having dual protagonists implies that both characters are given equal focus throughout the film, that both characters evolve at similar frequencies with the narrative ping-ponging between both storylines. In the film's first hour, the film is exclusively told through T'Challa's point of view, with Erik only getting one scene to establish his character. Erik spends the entirety of this hour waiting in the wings, and at just around the midpoint, he comes in to interrupt the protagonist's primary goal of capturing Lucia's claw. Effective immediately, Erik dismisses Claw from the equation, and changes the entire focus of the narrative. At this point, the film does take on a traditional dual protagonist structure, with scenes of T'Challa investigating the history of Erik intercut with Erik putting his plan into motion. There is a clear causality between these scenes. The information T'Challa learns from the past informs the actions Erik is about to make in the present. We follow these threads equally until they collide, and Killmonger wins. Just as Erik quote-unquote kills T'Challa and takes over his role as Black Panther, Erik is also taking over the role as protagonist, as it predominantly follows his journey into becoming the Black Panther. The film isn't about T'Challa or Erik, it's about the title of Black Panther. Okay, why is this important? Why did I just go on a giant semantic argument on who is or isn't the protagonist? Well, the reason why is rooted in the film's overarching conflict, the heart of the New Order villain. The film isn't about stopping Killmonger, it's about stopping the process that creates Killmonger. Both protagonists share this goal. The Black Panther created Killmonger, and the Black Panther is the only one who can stop him. Erik is the only one who can communicate this problem, and T'Challa is the only one with the wisdom to solve it. Ultimately, by structuring the film around the title of Black Panther, the film can effectively deconstruct the flawed system that needs correcting. How the goal of preservation creates desperation and moral compromise. How a society that elects its best fighter gives way for someone as ruthless as Erik. Every element of T'Challa's hero's journey is a setup for Erik's takeover. Each process is undermined as Wakanda is turned upside down. Eventually, the film does revert focus back to T'Challa, as he regains his strength and has a moral change of heart. But before he and the narrative can get there, the film has to first tell Erik's story. Again, he can't be stopped until he's first understood. And it's in this process, the point between Erik taking over and T'Challa being redeemed, that the film transcends superhero blockbuster storytelling and turns into one of the most nuanced and challenging explorations on what defines a person that I've ever seen. I think it's finally time to talk about the key transitional moment from a warrior becoming the Black Panther is to visit the ancestral plane, a ritual process that connects one with the spirit of their past loved ones, or in this case, their father. Whether this is a hallucination or an actual connection is irrelevant to the purpose of the ritual, as it contextualizes the task that lays before them. For T'Challa, we visit a vast open field with the sky coating the screen in a dreamlike purple hue. His father descends as a panther and meets him as his equal. The land and their relationship are in harmony. They say their final words to each other as T'Chaka gives him advice on how to best preserve this paradise. When T'Challa awakens, he is alert but calm, enriched by his spiritual experience. Fast forward an hour or so, and we see Erik partake in this exact same ritual. Now, by this point in the film, we've seen T'Challa's faith in his father and his role as Black Panther thoroughly destroyed. So now we see this process from a new perspective, from a warrior who was always an outsider. We begin with Erik walking into the past, as he visits the apartment where he spent his childhood. The paradise of Wakanda is trapped behind these walls, always in sight yet also out of reach. The camera then tilts down to show the empty space where he lost his father. His mentor figure remains forever absent. From here, the scene transitions into a memory, as Erik investigates the apartment to find its secrets.
What did I tell you about going into my things?
The second N'Jobu appears, Erik reverts back to being a child, reliving a moment they shared together learning about Wakanda. It's only from a child's eyes that we see the cruel nature of Wakanda's gatekeeping. It's here that the scene stops being a memory and more a reflection on their relationship. N'Jobu asks,
No tears for me?
And we see Erik as a kid dismissing his grief, having been accustomed to the hardships of his environment. It's at this moment that the film executes its most purposeful filmmaking, as through Erik's eyes we see his father, barely composed, saying,
Well, look at what I've done.
And then we cut to Erik back as an adult, tears running down his face. This is the transformative moment, a scared child becoming a dangerous adult, with the tears being the first crack in his impenetrable armor. Before he awakens, he has one final line left for his father.
Well, maybe your home's the ones that's lost. That's why they can't find us.
Now, this is all my interpretation, but based off the wording and Michael B. Jordan's inflection, it seems as though in this moment, Erik is still a kid. A child could never process this trauma on their own, and deep down, Erik is still in this neglected state. We see this transformation right before our eyes. A child who neglects trauma turns into a man who only knows how to fight their pain with rage. This is the most powerful moment of filmmaking within Black Panther, how it understands men who are consumed by rage are really kids that never quite grew up. This is another parallel to Ben Solo, whose temper tantrums are initially played for laughs alongside his boyish looks, until said rage consumes him and he becomes utterly terrifying.
Traitor!
The key element to the New Order villain is that deep down they are all of us. They are our deepest fears and insecurities manifested into monsters. I think it's no coincidence that the film's director Ryan Coogler was also once a kid from Oakland running around believing in fairy tales. There's been a lot of talk on how groundbreaking Black Panther was for genre filmmaking, how the film was a cultural moment for Black audience members to celebrate their heritage. However, I think that's only half the equation. As much as we as audiences need to see our best selves represented on screen, we also need to see the worst parts of ourselves, as a way to confront them. Black Panther doesn't choose between one or the other. It gives both sides their moments, working harmoniously on screen. Art is one of our greatest tools to challenge and understand our past while preparing us for our future. And as a Marvel fan, I just can't believe a film like this exists in their pantheon. Again, I don't think it's perfect, and I wish the filmmakers found a more compelling way to internalize this conflict within the third act battle. This is one place where Thor Ragnarok was far more successful. But what the film lacks in its action, it well then makes up for with its empathy, as I'm not forgetting that final conversation with Erik anytime soon. One of the lessons T'Challa learns in Black Panther is to share Wakanda's sacred vibranium to empower the rest of the world. Now while we in the real world don't have vibranium, we do have the next best thing: Squarespace. Squarespace gives you the tools to conquer your creative goals. With Squarespace's dynamic all-in-one platforms, you can claim a domain, build a website, sell online, and market your brand. With their award-winning templates, making a powerful online identity is easier than using a Kimoyo bead. Each template is a starting point for a wide range of projects, whether you're pursuing your side hustle or promoting your main gig. If anything ever goes wrong, you can always rely on their award-winning 24/7 customer support. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/filmsandstuff to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.